listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of Columbo Season 10, Episode 1. Columbo Goes to College. First broadcast on the 9th of December 1990 on ABC. It's not technically Season 10. Season 9 was the last broadcast season, and after that there were a series of specials from then until the series finished. But I'll be following the IMDb listings for the seasons from here on out. Written by returning writer Jeffrey Bloom and directed by veteran TV director E.W. Swackhamer in his only directing for Columbo. The episode begins with some on-screen titles letting us know that this is set at Fremont College, before we meet rich students Cooper Redman and Justin Rowe at their frat house, played by Gary Hirschberger and Stephen Caffrey respectively. We are then introduced to Cooper's father, played by a returning Alan Fudge, last seen in Columbo Goes to the Guillotine. Cooper has got yet another girl pregnant, convinced her to have an abortion, and now the girl's father is threatening to sue. His father gives him an ultimatum. One more screw-up and he's cut off from his father's wealth. Later in class, Professor Rusk reveals Columbo will be joining the faculty as a guest lecturer, and we learn Redman and Rowe have been caught cheating.
I know about the test. That you took the test, stole the test.
What?
Not a word, you hear me?
Potentially leaving Redman to be disowned by his father. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this opening. I feel like it spends more time setting up locations than it does setting up characters, and would have preferred it if it had started at the Redman house, introduced the ultimatum, and Redman and Rowe's friendship. There then moved on to the college, so we had a sense of some chronology. As it is, it's unclear if this all happens on the same day or not, nor does it really give us any sense of geography or character. I also don't like Columbo coming to the campus as a guest lecturer. It's a little bit more Murder, She Wrote than Columbo. Columbo doesn't need an excuse to be at a crime scene. He's a homicide detective. After their dressing down, the two boys follow Professor Rusk and find him having dinner with a fellow teacher's wife, a very heated dinner. They then return to their frat house, and Rowe decides their best course of action is to kill Rusk and make it look like it was one of his many enemies, including members of the mob who he has implicated in his latest book. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's a similar idea to the one in Episode 1, Murder by the Book, although in that episode the book didn't really exist, it was manufactured by the murderer. I think the fact that Rowe's mind immediately turns to murder in this situation, rather than the very obvious possibility of blackmail, indicates that he always had an inclination towards murder, and this is merely an opportunity rather than a last resort. I like that this is subtly suggested by the script rather than spelled out for us, and it clearly doesn't take him very long to come up with a plan. He speaks with Rusk and asks him to meet his father at a restaurant that night to talk about the situation. We then see Columbo's first class, as he regales the students with one of his cases. Rusk leaves to meet Rowe's father, while Redman and Rowe have set up an automated gun to shoot him when he gets to his car. After the lecture, the students all leave with Columbo, and together find Rusk's body in the car park. Rowe takes off to get help and sends the campus security guard to the crime scene, while he calls for help. After the rest of the police have arrived, Columbo has some issues with the scene. There was a single tablet amongst Rusk's personal effects. The shell case is found outside the car park. Columbo can't work out where Rusk was going mid-lecture, and Rusk had left his briefcase in his office, suggesting he planned to return. After working out the tablet was for cholesterol to be taken before food, he works out Rusk must have been going to eat, and so checks out the local restaurants, discovering he'd left a message for Mr. Rowe at the restaurant, the one that Rowe Jr. said his father would be at. It seems the boys may have made their first mistake. What I like about this is that it feels real. It's just the sort of thing that trips up actual murderers, an unexpected detail that they couldn't possibly account for in how human beings act. And Columbo does exactly the right thing in the way he goes about investigating it. Columbo then goes to see the class, who have convened at a local bar, and asks them about Rusk.
Any campus is bound to be something of a rumor mill.
At this point, Rowe makes a point of suggesting Rusk had many enemies, but also gives away his surname.
Well, you've certainly come to the right place, Lieutenant. Mr. Rowe here always seems to hear more rumors than anyone else.
To cover their tracks, Rowe goes so far as tipping off the media about Rusk's affair with June Clark, and Columbo speaks with the woman in question. She says they broke it off months ago. As Columbo is leaving, Redman and Rowe just happen to show up to suggest she's lying, and point him towards the bar that they saw them together at. The bartender there confirms the boys' version of events. They both think they're leading Columbo on a merry dance to the tune they're playing. But we of course know better, as Columbo watches them when he goes to make a call about whether there was a plane ticket amongst Rusk's possessions.
Pretty funny.
He then goes to see Rusk's wife, who, remarkably, is able to provide June Clark with an alibi. He asks her, then June Clark, about the fictitious plane ticket, which they know nothing about, but when he asks the boys, they claim they were aware of this trip Rusk was planning to take. The trip Columbo made up. It's not often that we see a Columbo trap pay off so suddenly. But as we get to know this pair of killers, we like them less and less, especially as not only are they trying to get away with murder, they're also trying to mess with Columbo. And, unlike Columbo Cries Wolf, we are let in on the fact that Columbo knows exactly what they're up to. Rowe suggests Columbo meet his father, who just so happens to be returning Columbo legend Robert Culp. He is an absolutely joyful addition to the episode. He's so condescending and dismissive of Columbo, you kind of wish he was the one that did it.
You're investigating the murder of Professor Rusk, and you're unaware that the man wrote a series of highly incendiary profiles exposing major crime figures in the United States?
It certainly makes Rowe, who has been incredibly unlikable up to this point, seem somewhat sympathetic. Not nearly sympathetic enough, though. Columbo discovers that Rowe is the one who saved the only security tape of the crime, from the one angle that doesn't show where the killer must have been. The next day, both the Rowes point suspicion towards the man the boys stole the gun off, the security guard's brother, Dominic Doyle, who has previous. Columbo goes to speak with him, and when he mentions the gun that was used, Doyle is spooked as he recognises it at his missing gun, but doesn't give too much away. However, this is interrupted by a news report of a recording of the murder from a different angle.
Where did that come from? How the hell did they get that film?
One that the boys didn't know existed. The news station revealed to Columbo that the recording comes from a man who lived near the college, with a satellite dish who accidentally picked up the recording of the signal the boys used to make sure their remote shot hit its mark. It seems Columbo now has means and opportunity. He goes to the boys and tells them what he knows about the recording. His trap is set, and now all he needs to do is to bait it. He gets a call about a car he's been looking for, Dominic's car, and says the make, model and license plate aloud so the boys can hear. The police find the car thanks to a tip-off from the boys, and they find the gun inside, arresting Dominic. The next day, the boys turn up at college, and Columbo is waiting for them. He's reconstructing the crime for class, but, unbeknownst to Redmond and Rowe, he's reconstructing what really happened. They set up a remote gun and camera from Redmond's truck. Redmond watched a monitor while Rowe made the shot. They can't understand why Dominic wasn't arrested when the murder weapon was found in his car. But it's at this point Columbo reveals that it's not Dominic's car. It's Mrs. Columbo's car, and the only two people who thought it was Dominic's car were Redmond and Rowe.
But it is not Dominic Doyle's car. It's my wife's.
This is a fairly simple plot, but with lots of complicated elements, some which work and some which don't. There's the obvious allusion to real-life murderers Leopold and Loeb, previously explored in Hitchcock's Rope, and unfortunately that draws obvious comparisons to that film, which is why I find it an odd choice to use this for this story. There's nothing in the plot that specifically requires two people to have done the murder. We don't really get to know the two characters that well, and their relationship and dynamic isn't explored that much. Because of this choice, there's a really interesting dynamic between Rowe and his parents that is left underexplored, and Redmond's family life is entirely ignored after his father's initial appearance. I would have loved to have seen Rowe manipulating his father to play the role the murderer usually takes in Columbo, while being completely unaware of his son's crime. That felt much more original in what little we see of it than what we got in the final story. I also don't think Rusk needed to be adulterous, as that adds very little to the plot. Nor do I think hiding exactly how they did the murder until the end to be particularly interesting. It also clearly wouldn't have worked the way it's supposed to have, because the camera and the gun would have had to have been visible, something that could have been easily solved by simply parking the truck the other way around. I don't mind that they recycled the gotcha from A Friend Indeed. I think it works just as well in this new setting, although I think it was unnecessary, as they could have used the discovered video footage as the gotcha. I'm surprised that Columbo wasn't immediately onto Rowe, as he chose to drive out of the car park to the front of the building to get the security guard, rather than just go up the stairs they all just came down. But that aspect is never mentioned again, and I think the pill leading to Columbo finding the restaurant is trying a little too hard to be clever. I've never known anyone to take a single pill out of a bottle to have loose in their pocket. He could have easily just found a note with the restaurant's name on it and given us more screen time fleshing out the characters. I did like the way the boys try to make a fool of Columbo, but we are made aware he knows this from early on, and I love the scenes between Culp and Falk. But all in all, for me, this is another 3 out of 5, but could have easily been a 5 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.